So if you're a big fan of the Danny Miranda podcast, this is the portion you don't want to miss. Danny is currently number 38 on the Entrepreneur podcast. He's done over 300 episodes and is constantly hosting big names. We're talking Gary Vee, Tom Bilyeu, Iman Ghazi, and a ton more. In this portion, I'll be asking him such questions as, how do you feel about your audience saying that you're the next Nardwuar? Can you still reach out to your previous big guests? Can you ask them for advice or favors? And we're going to also have deep discussions about his life journey where you don't want to miss. All right, let's get to it. So first off, Danny, how does it make you feel when the audience is comparing you to Nardwuar? Every comment on YouTube is pretty much how they love your ability to do deep research and shock your guests.
I love it, man. I'm always honored and humbled whenever anyone compares me to Nardwuar. And the hard part of it is making it feel and flow like a conversation while also really caring about the guest and winking at them and being like, yo, I see you. I'm always like, wow, like Nardwuar is a legend. He's somebody that I've watched for a long time. And he's somebody I really respect and admire as a host and as somebody who asks questions. So whenever I'm compared to him, I always smile a little bit. I'm like, all right, if I just keep doing it for another 30, 40 years, maybe I'll get to his status and his place in society and culture.
Like I Googled his net worth and it was insane. It's a shocker. You want
Really?
to guess?
I have no idea. What fascinates me about him is he's someone who clearly is just doing what he loves. Mm. And so to me, that's the ultimate win. But you said, oh, it was a shocker. So I'm going to guess it's $10 million.
It says 15 million. Now you don't know exactly how.
50?
15, 15.
Okay.
But,
So
I'm hoping he gets that 50. Right.
So I was right there.
Yeah. So you're close, but still cool. Just doing something that he loves. Everybody, he has that high reputation too, like you can get money, but the fact that, amongst the communities, even like hip hop, right? Because he's big into that scene and people are like, oh yeah, he's awesome. And he does his own thing too. You're like, this guy's so goofy with the hat and there's no way he can make it to the top. And he did. So that's really cool. Okay, here's another question, but this one may catch you off guard. Why are you so detailed with dates? Because you'll cite it off with the books that you read. You're like, oh, I read this book this day, this day, this day. Your journals. You can list off episode numbers. You're like, episode 46, I discussed with this person. Haha.
Episode 46 was, I think, Tej Dosa interviewing me.
Yeah. See, this is insane.
It's funny, man. I think it's just like when you love something, you remember it more clearly. And the reason why I'm so specific with the dates, and I've never got this question before, so hats off to you, is because I want to give people context for different parts of the journey. And the best way to do that is to date it. Mm-hmm. And so if I say, 4 years ago, I was in a dark place versus in September 2019, I was in a dark place. Well, somebody could then look at that episode and see, okay, where was he at this point? And the dates to me also have a representation of like the different highs and lows of the wave of life. And there's certain months that I'm like, oh, I was really flowing with life at this point, or like certain moments where I'm like, yo, that life was slapping me. And so I'm able to notice the different ways in which I was approaching life at different dates. And also like, I think that like when you put a date in a podcast, it also makes people go back to their own place of like, what was I doing 4 years ago? What was I up to at this point or that point? And it gives people a little more context for everything that occurred. So that's kind of why I think about dates so much, and they really stick out to me. You're right. That's a good insight from you.
But did you always have this type of habit? Because I don't think all of a sudden, like at a certain episode, you're like, I'm going to start dating this, right? Because it seems like it's always been a part of you, but then you just really amplified it as a way to document your journey so people can reference and look back.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's always been a part of me or not. I just know that it's super helpful for me because I also think in a long time horizon. I'm thinking like, what's a podcast going to look like in 10 years or 20? And so if I'm like, okay, this was 3 years ago, it's helpful for me to be like, all right, I was just starting in September 2020. And so if I just started the journey in September 2020 and I'm going to be doing this for 10 years, well, we have to think about September 2030 and what that's going to look like. So I think the dates are just a way to point to the long time horizons, and they're just a subtle nod to those long time horizons. And I think it started when I started thinking, oh, I really enjoy this. I want to be doing this for a long time. And if I want to be doing this for a long time, let me mark those moments with specific dates.
So in the past, you mentioned that you see yourself as a character, right? Like you're able to kind of take yourself out and you view yourself as the person doing these things. And now you just mentioned to me like you have the dates and document, and you also love books, right? You love autobiographies. Is this kind of just a way where you're taking a look at your own life and like, I'm going to be writing my own biography, and I want to make sure I got this part, that part, that part. So when I tell a story, whether it's to your kids or to the world, you can be like, no, this is how I did it, and that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about understanding the autobiography piece. I just finished Kevin Hart's autobiography, and I just listened to Russ's this morning. It's All in Your Head. Both great books. I highly recommend. And I think I'm just trying to understand people who have used their voice to create change in the world. And, Kevin Hart and Russ are two people who have done that. And so for me, it's just like, how can I get better at telling my own story? How can I get better at understanding the people who have done it before me? And how do I just continuously think about life in 10 years and continue to build from that perspective?
Well, we're going to take it one step further, because you did mention that one day you were just, sitting out in the sun, and it clicked to you what's going to be on your tombstone. That was
crazy, right?
You wanted to, make the world happier, wiser, and more upbeat,
Healthier.
something along those lines?
Healthier. Happier, healthier, and wiser.
Okay, so we're going to take this a little step different. We're going to tweak it. Let's say you're 100 years old. You're still living. It's not your tombstone. It's you. And you're looking back at your life. What needs to happen where you look back and you say, this was a really cool journey? Like, I really enjoyed this adventure that I went on.
I think for me, it's about trying to make each day as meaningful as possible. And if I can make each day as meaningful as possible, then each week will be. And then if each week will be, then each month will be. And if each month will be, then each year, decade, etc. So I think like for me, it just starts with the day. And how can I make today meaningful is a great way to frame that conversation and think about that. And one thing I know is like, okay, I have to be present to make it meaningful. Another thing is like, okay, I have to be interested in helping other people other than myself. 3, I got to be full of love. I got to feel connection to the people I'm talking to myself, and really spread love to the best of my abilities. Another is I have to work hard. I have to do everything I possibly can do that day to help propel and push my vision forward. So I just rattled off a few things off the top of my head, like being present, working hard, showing up with love. To me, that's like a life well lived. And if I could do that for the next 70 years, I'll look back and be like, all right, I did it to the best of my abilities. So long as I can continue becoming self-aware and trying to help myself when I inevitably misstep from one of those things, because I'm a human being, not a robot. I'm never going to get all of those things perfect. So yeah, that's kind of how I think about it.
So it's more like you have inside yourself certain standards and indications, and you say, as long as I can follow that, we'll see where this journey takes me. But as long as you stick to that, regardless of wherever it'll take you, you'll be happy with it.
Yes. And so each night what I do is I rank the day from -2 to +2. And I got this from Jim Collins on the Tim Ferriss show. And he talked about a simple way to figure out if you're on the right path is just rank your day from -2 to +2 at the end of every day. And I started doing this, and I was like, this is really helpful. This helps me, because what do you do 3 Tuesdays ago? Personally, I have no idea. But if I review my little note that I put about myself in my journal, I can sense all right, this is what I was actually doing. I can get back to that place, and I have a ranking for what I viewed was either the successful day or an unsuccessful day, and why. And so a life well lived is just a bunch of +2 days stringed together over a long enough time horizon. So
I'm upset right now because in part 1, you lied to me. You lied to me. I'm going to tell it right now.
Please.
You told me I am not analytical.
I'm terrible at being analytical, and my friends
And over here, you're telling me I journal, I mark the times, the rankings, everything. How is this not analytical? I think it comes down to more what you're analytical about.
I think that's a great insight. I am analytical about some things. I'm not analytical about others. And I don't know why that is. And I don't view myself as analytical in the realm of social media is like how I was thinking about it. Like looking at the numbers, how many people are viewing this post or and like, I do care and I do look at it, but I don't really like obsess over it in a way, the way that some of my friends do. And because of that, it leads me to believe that I'm not analytical about the numbers on social media. So that's a good call out on you. I guess I am analytical about the things that I find meaningful.
Well, and of course, it makes sense, right? If you're passionate about it, as you mentioned, you're going to remember. So clearly, it's not necessarily about the numbers per se on your social media. It's more about just the metrics that really matter to you in life.
Yes. Well said.
Here's a different type of question. Do you think that you have an addictive personality? Because you mentioned that you did have past addictions. You weren't addicted to alcohol. Gambling, I'm curious, did you love to play blackjack? Because that I want to know. But at the same time, could that have been a blessing? Because now that you're able to like reshape how you want to use it, that addictive personality is such a blessing in what you're doing with this podcast now, right?
Definitely. Yeah, I do have an addictive personality, I would say. And I knew that about myself at a pretty young age. And to me, it was about how I could channel that addiction to something that's going to help people, going to help myself, and create a life that is one that I feel is meaningful. And if I can channel my addiction to that, like, that's fine with me. Like, I'm good with that. If I can channel my addiction to meditation or my addiction to fitness or my addiction to helping people through the podcast, like, all right, I'm addicted. But like, is that such a bad thing? But it is a bad thing when it becomes a destructive force, when it's like women or it's gambling. Like sports betting was my vice of choice. And so I'm really happy that I noticed that about myself and that I was able to correct that and go in a different direction, because it's really been a huge thing for me and really helped me like become all I can be, is like realizing that I was addicted to things and that I could put it in the right direction.
Do you think that there's a pattern between reaching success? For example, it seemed like you probably hit a rock bottom where you said, enough is enough. I think you were out in California at the time. You're rocking the job, making an income, but you're like, something's not right. And you were kind of chasing these dopamine, whether it was sports betting or it could be whatever it was. You knew in your gut that something wasn't right. Imam Ghazi, he said like at a certain point, he was at a low point with his mom and then he bounced back. So is this a formula where oftentimes people hit rock bottom and some are fortunate enough to really overcome, but on the same side, do some hit rock bottom and they stay there?
Yeah, I'm sure some do hit rock bottom and stay there. We just don't hear a lot about those people, or, and so the people who are telling or explaining their story are often the ones who have done something after the rock bottom. And I think it's inevitable. It's part of life. It's just something that's going to be very difficult to avoid no matter how much you try to. But I think part of reaching for tremendous heights is also having lows as well, because sometimes you're going to be unsuccessful. Sometimes it's actually not going to work out. And the question is, like, who are you in that moment? Who are you when things don't turn out as planned? 200 episodes, I was doing the podcast. It didn't turn out as planned. So it's like, who am I in that moment? And, I figured that out. But it's like, also, who was I before I even started the journey 3.5 years ago, when I'm just working at the job in September of 2019 or June of 2019 or July, like sports betting, because I didn't have the courage to look at myself and be like, I got to stop doing this job. But I just went down the path of like, let me just soothe this pain in some way. I could have done that forever, like hypothetically. And so I think it's worth asking yourself, like, in what ways am I soothing the pain because I'm not looking at something that I know needs to be looked at? And when you do, it's a very painful realization of, I'm going in the wrong path. But it's also an amazing realization because it gives you the ability to start anew, which is scary at first, but you'll get used to it, because we tend to get used to things eventually that they then become the new normal. And so my suggestion is lean into that if you feel that feeling.
So what about somebody that's, let's say, 20 years old? They're listening. They're like, wow, Danny is saving me right now. He's showing me like you can use meditation as one tool to love yourself and then proceed into the future. But what about somebody that's a little bit further ahead? They've made their decisions and their consequences are more severe, such as somebody that's 50 years old and they're saying like, okay, yeah, that's easy to say change, but they already seen the consequences and they're wanting to change, but they're too far down the path. What would you say to those two people in those two different perspectives?
Yeah, so the 20-year-old, I would say, like, you have your whole life ahead of you. And the 50-year-old, I would say, you have your whole life ahead of you. Like, even though it doesn't seem like that in this moment, to the 50-year-old, it's like, what, another 30, 40 years of like working, of being able to have your wits about you, to be sharp. Like, the internet's here, and like you could like do crazy things as a 50-year-old if you apply yourself to it. And so I would say they're both young, and I would say that there's so much potential ahead for both people to change their lives. The question is like, are you ready to take that leap? And, you know, maybe the person hearing that in this moment is not, and that's okay. Like, you can not be ready to take the leap if you're listening and you're like, I'm in the wrong place. Like, we tend to know, like, if we're in the wrong place in life, you're waking up and you're not like excited about life. Like, that's possible for everyone. I truly believe that. And so, yeah, I mean, I recommend just look at yourself and really asking, like, what was I doing as a child? What was I doing if I could do anything for no money? Like, what would I be doing? And just like playing with that idea a little bit. And it might not be your first thing. I remember when I asked myself that question in March of 2020, it was like, let me write on the internet. Because when I wrote on the internet, I was a kid and I loved doing that. And that was like what lit me up, and I would do even if no one was paying me to do it. I started a time management blog, and I started a Knicks blog, and it's like those things were just inherent to me. So March of 2020, that's what I did. But then by September of 2020, that led me to podcasting in a way. I wouldn't have started the podcast had I not started blogging first and writing blog posts that no one read. So I think it's like important to ask yourself, what was I doing as a kid? And let that lead you to your next path, or let that lead you to something you may do in the future.
And I liked one of your end of your year videos where you actually told the audience your lessons that you've learned up until that point. One thing that really struck me was that you were 2 years deep, and then you were just starting to get that traction, like that wheel going. And you kind of thought like, okay, did I really waste those 2 years? And now all of a sudden I'm doing something right? But you said, no, you got what you needed, just you got paid in a different way.
Yes, that's exactly right. And it can be easy to think like when the monetary income isn't coming from the thing you're doing, that it's not valuable, but that's not true. I've never been paid $1 to lift a weight. I've never been paid $1 to meditate. But are those things not valuable to me? No, those things have made the podcast come to be and reality in different ways. And so they have helped me indirectly. And so I think like when we equate monetary value to actual value to your being, it's like you can get value out of something and not get paid to do it. And I didn't realize that for a long time. And when I did realize that, all the good things started flowing. It just took a while for that to occur.
I think that's where you mentioned that it's one thing to reach the success, but a lot of people do hit their whatever goal, their mindset, where they say, okay, once I hit that, then I'll be happy. But it seems that you took the opposite approach. You said, no, first I need to be happy.
Yeah.
Then I can hit my milestones.
Yes, absolutely. Because you're going to hit the milestones and then you're going to say to yourself, okay, now what? Which is what happened when I did the job that I didn't like. I was making money and I was like, okay, like now I have to do the thing every day that I don't like doing. So why don't I just do a thing that I like doing, and I'll make money in enough time? And that's what happened. So,
you mind sharing what job that was that you were doing?
So what I was doing was I was doing e-commerce templates for different people who were going to start their own e-commerce store. And so I had built up a successful e-commerce store, and I was selling like custom, handmade, those like different anniversary bracelets. And I was just trying to like, all right, like this is a quick way to make money. This is good. And I was making money doing that. And I had other stores as well where I was showing people like, all right, this is what you do to like start a store overnight. And I made money like in the first 8 days of doing it. And then I was like, and then a company hired me to help other people create stores because I had done it 2 times. And then I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I'm making all this money from all these stores and this is great. And then I was like, wait, but when I'm procrastinating doing this work, I'm sports betting and I'm watching podcasts. Okay, like this is a good sign that I don't actually like doing this thing, but it took me like 3 months to realize. So the job, to answer your question, was just creating templates for future e-commerce store owners.
So when it comes to templates, do you feel like that applies to a lot of people's journeys to get to the thing that they should be doing in life that they love? Because I feel it's similar to maybe Jordan Peterson when he talks about order and chaos. And it seems that in order to get you on that journey, first thing you had to do was you needed order. You needed self-discipline. You needed to prove to yourself that you can do, what was it, 75 hard, that you could do the workout. And that was just, you actually have tangible results that whatever you want to do, you can do. And then the chaos is the creativity, where it's like, what should you be doing? You think like, oh, I should be doing that. But then you're like, nah, that's not feasible, etc. But then you were able to look inside, say, you love podcasting, you love talking, connecting with people. So then you had your order and you had your chaos. The meditation with the self-love was the first point that really unlocked the key for you to go for it. And that's your template, your formula. Do you think that there is a formula, just a basic formula for people to attack what they want to get out of life that makes them really happy?
I think it's a great question. I don't know if it is top down or bottom up, meaning I just stumbled across meditation because I saw my friend do it. And I was like, all right, like that, he seems to be different in some way. So like, let me just follow his lead. I mean, I think there are some attributes that are just, you kind of see over and over again studying successful people. It's just like, all right, this person worked really hard. All right, they enjoyed what they did a lot of the times. All right, even when they failed, they kept going. So it's like, I don't know if there's like a template we can give people. I think more so it's like you have to follow, like, what am I missing in this moment? For me, like, I was missing a lot of different things. I was missing self-love. I was missing discipline. I was missing the ability to do what I said I was going to do. I was missing connections to the world with cool people. Like, I was missing a lot in life. And so I think it's about identifying, like, what are you missing? And I think we know inherently, like, what we're missing, and we just need to stop and look at ourselves. So maybe meditation is the answer for, like, if you don't know what you're missing, like, just fit 20 minutes in the morning and just see what happens and see what comes up to mind. And that'll make you more self-aware, and that'll make you'll have the ability to, like, look at your thoughts and decide if you want to take them or leave them. And so, yeah, maybe that's like the first piece that I would help people start with is, like, if you don't feel like you're self-aware, try looking at yourself first.
But you also have a new course coming out, right? Is 1 + 1 = 3.
Yes.
And is, like, tell us more about that then, because if you don't necessarily have a template, you have maybe certain steps and characteristics that are required. So then what is this course going to be about then?
Yeah. So the first step is about connecting with yourself. And that's because the reason why I've been able to connect to all these incredible people is because I first connected with myself. And I first said to myself, all right, like, what are we doing here? And just, like, watch the thoughts go by. And so for me, the podcast started, like, you could say that it started in September of 2020, but actually it started in September of 2019 when I first started meditating for 20 minutes in the morning. And then it turned into 20 minutes in the morning and evening. And then it turned into 60 minutes in the morning. So before I'd even started the podcast, I must have done hundreds of hours of meditation. Just, like, think about that for a second. It's like, I couldn't have connected with all these people or known the questions to ask them or known how they impacted me if I'd not first connected with myself. So, like, that's the first thing that lights me up. And the answer for most people or everyone won't be like, start a podcast. And that's why, like, I don't want to create a podcasting course. I want to create a connection course because we all need to connect with ourselves first. So you connect with yourself first. Great. Now, after you know what you want and who you are, you then connect with the world. You then say to yourself, okay, well, I really like crypto, and, like, crypto is the thing that lights me up. Well, now I'm going to look ahead and into the world and see, like, all right, who is doing crypto the best? Who are the amazing people that I love? Who do I want to connect with? You can only figure that out by first connecting with yourself. And so there you connect with other people. And in the course, I'm going to show, like, the different ways and the little tweaks that I made to make that possible. For example, like, one of them is, like, all right, let's say you really like that person. You check their likes, and that's a cool tactic that I just thought of in this conversation. But then it's like, go to their following list, see who they follow. Is there anyone they follow that you know? Well, that's a good way to potentially connect with them. Then the third step for the course is, like, all right, you connected with those people. How do you connect the people you meet with other people? Because when you connect those other people together, the one person you connect and the one person you connect, well, that equals something greater than 1 + 1. And so that's where the title comes from, because I noticed that when I started connecting people, there was something more that was gained than just the connection, what either of those people could have done alone. And I realized that whenever we connect, we make more possible than what we could do alone if I'm connecting with myself, it's like I'm gaining something more than just person A, person B. It's like there's something else that comes out of it. And so that's what makes me so excited.
Do you believe in the concept of like we have, I don't know, there's probably multiple dimensions, but not going off too far on a tangent. Like we got like energy, right? Because people will describe somebody came in the room and you're like, oh man, something just
You can feel it.
the voodoo. But then when you are really vibing with somebody, that energy is just much greater. And I read this kind of concept that let's say we have an energy field, but then when we get with more people like us, it doesn't just add, it actually multiplies. So that kind of ties into what you were saying there. Do you believe in that kind of concept?
100%. I mean, like, I don't know enough about the energy stuff, but I know that, like, I feel it. Like, I feel it when I'm connecting with somebody. I feel it when, like, it's a wild thing to experience where you're just like in a conversation, you're like, wow, okay, this conversation, me connecting with this person in this conversation is not just going to help me and this person. It's going to help cut up hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people. And that to me is such a wild thing to think about. And it just highlights the point even further. So, yeah, I mean, I think about often the example Eckhart Tolle gave in A New Earth, where he sits down, he has a conversation with a woman. She's like, I don't remember the exact scenario. I don't want to get it wrong, but from how I remember it, he meets with a woman who has really bad energy. A lot of negative things have happened to her. And she tells Eckhart the situations. And then Eckhart goes ahead and goes to a restaurant like an hour later. And the table next to him when Eckhart sits down, table next to him starts to go crazy at the waiter. And like the guy ends up getting kicked out of the restaurant. And Eckhart is just like, holy smokes. And the waitress says like, Eckhart, did you cause this in some way? Like jokingly. But that's like an example that sticks out. And I'm always like, huh, like what's going on there? So super cool idea.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. But talking about the energy, you watch any podcast, and what I find really fascinating is that you do seem to be on a buzz. You mentioned like, what's your buzz? And like, I look at some of my past interviews, I'm really intrigued. I'm really into it. But I look at my face, I'm like, and I look at you and you're like, yeah, tell me what, like you are really engaged and you're loving it. Can you walk us through kind of that feeling in that moment? Are you thinking, oh, this is going to like impact so much? Or are you just natural interview mode where you just want to connect and you're like, I'm just curious. Tell me more. Really? Okay, that's fascinating. What about this? What about that?
Yeah, no, it's just inherent in me. And it's just like, I just get so excited. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. I just know that like, I'm really enjoying whatever they're saying. And I also know like it could potentially impact and help people in a massive way. So both of that just gets me so amped up. And I also know like, I think about the longitudinal nature of everything I'm doing. It's going to mean more when George Heaton, is a billionaire than it will mean today, the interview that we did. So like, I think about the long time horizons as well. And that gets me so excited because I'm like, yo, people might be watching this in like 2030 or 2070. And like, even this conversation, it's like, I get big enough. It's like, you get big enough. Like, people are like, holy smokes. Like, I got to go back. I got to go to the archives. I got to go back to the early days. And so that's when conversations like this resurface. And it's so cool to understand that in that moment.
True. So on the flip side, why do you think that there is so much like negativity and depression out there, right? Because you're putting out the message like, okay, meditate, chill, love yourself, which implies that that's not a thing that's very common or that it's an issue out there that needs to be corrected. So why do you think that there is such negativity and depression out there?
I think because times are getting better and times are getting worse at the same time. And that's a hard thing to wrap our heads around. But it's like, you can go on a binge of nonstop social media, of nonstop just like violence. You could just watch the news all day long and just like, you could go to the depths of hell right now, like within your fingertips on this, like on your phone or on your laptop. You could also go to the depths of heaven. You could feel the amazing energy. You could watch somebody work out. You can, learn about your favorite passion or pursuit. And so when you have both of those dualities at the same time, it creates people like me and it creates people who are who are negative and people who are cynical. So that's not to say that I am equivalent to heaven, but it just goes to say I'm trying to point a light in that direction. I'm trying to be a source of love. I'm trying to be a source of positivity, optimism, hope, inspiration, like in a very real sense. And knowing that I'll mess up along that path, but I'm just trying to be the best I can every day. And I hope people take that, and I hope the people who are trying to do that as well take that. And it's so cool seeing the people who resonate with the message and seeing people who are on that wavelength as well, because it's always like kind, smart, interesting, insightful people.
Yeah, and you want those type of people. Like, what good is, let's say, 100,000 followers on Twitter if half of them are negative or, you know, they're just But if you have like even 1,000 that are amazing,
yeah,
that's incredible. Okay, so I got one final question here before we wrap up. I'm sure the audience wants to know, with these big names that you had on your channel, do you still have connections with them? Can you call them up and be like, hey man, I need some advice. How about we do like this little business project thing together? Do they pick up your calls, or is it more like, hey, you got good connections, but you can't really reach out to them?
It's a good question. I think that it's been cool to see how many quote unquote big people or people that I looked up to just a year ago or 2 years ago are just now like people I text and just people on my phone. It's a wild thing, and I really like have to like zoom out to realize like how significant it is. I remember like just even last night, like one of my favorite podcasters was just like, yeah, come over for dinner anytime. Like, can't wait to see you again. I'm just like, what is happening? Like, this is just a wild thing to think about. And like, it's a really cool experience that I'm living in this body and mind. And it blows my mind. And sometimes I'm speechless because of it. And I think that's the coolest thing, when you could turn the people who you really admire into friends and close connections. It doesn't always happen, and I don't expect it to always happen. But when it does, it's super cool.
Oh, for sure. So before we wrap up here, is there any final message that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I would say that the most important thing you could take away from this is just to listen to yourself. Like, I always say, like, don't listen to my podcast. Like, listen to yourself. Like, that's going to, like, listen to my podcast too if you want to supplement that. But like, the most important thing you could figure out is you. And the more time you spend with yourself, the more ideas will come up, and the more you will get in touch with the truest version of yourself. The world needs more people who are getting in touch with their true version. And it's a hard thing to do, because it might mean that you are doing things wrong in this current moment, but like, it's so worth it. I'm here like 3.5 years later since I started meditating, and it's just like, it is the most important thing that I could do. It is my highest ROI habit for happiness, for life, for everything. So yeah, just spend some time looking at yourself today, tomorrow, and consistently, and then watch what happens over the next year. That's my final closing words.
Awesome. Danny, thank you so much for coming onto the channel and allowing me to interview you and also get your insights. Oh, this was such a privilege. Thank you. So if you enjoyed this video as well, please make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on Twitter. And Danny, what's the best way for people to follow your work?
The best way for people to follow my work is checking out my podcast, the Danny Miranda Podcast. Hey, Danny Miranda on Twitter is probably the best to let me know if you enjoyed this episode, and tweet to me if you did. But yeah, the podcast, the Danny Miranda Podcast, wherever you listen.
Sounds great. I'll be leaving links in the description, so you can definitely check it out. And definitely keep an eye out for his upcoming course, 1 + 1 = 3. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video.